The human exploration team had just landed on the remote, desolate planet. It was a world forgotten by time, its surface dotted with the ruins of what was once a thriving alien civilization. The sky above was dark, filled with thick clouds that never seemed to move, casting a dull, lifeless shadow over everything. The air was thin and cold, making every breath feel heavier than it should. But the human team was determined, eager to explore the mysteries this place held. Captain Aria stood at the front, her boots crunching against the rocky ground as she surveyed the surroundings. Her team moved swiftly behind her, scanning the area with their high-tech equipment. They had been on many missions before, but there was something different about this one. It felt wrong. The feeling grew stronger as they ventured deeper into the abandoned city ahead of them. Towering structures once filled with life now lay in ruins, their once pristine walls now cracked and weathered by centuries of neglect. "Look at this," one of the crew members, Lieutenant Harris, called out, pointing toward a broken archway. "These designs, I've never seen anything like it before. These people must have been incredibly advanced." Aria nodded but didn't say anything. Her thoughts were elsewhere. They had come here for a reason. An ancient signal had been detected coming from the planet, and it was unlike anything the team had ever encountered. The signal suggested that there were still beings on this planet, survivors. But the question was, who were they? And why had they been left behind? As the team moved forward, they came across a large open area, the remnants of what looked like a once beautiful plaza. In the center, half buried beneath debris, lay a small group of alien creatures. They were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Thin with skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light, their eyes wide open, yet lifeless, the humans approached cautiously, unsure of what they were looking at. "Are they dead?" Lieutenant Harris whispered, his voice filled with uncertainty. Before anyone could answer, one of the aliens stirred. Slowly, it lifted its head and blinked, its wide eyes locking onto Captain Aria. She froze, unsure of what to do. The creature's appearance was haunting, yet its eyes held something human-like. Intelligence, fear, a spark of life that seemed out of place in this forgotten world. The alien's voice was weak, barely a whisper, but it was enough for Aria to understand. "Help us," it said, its voice trembling with exhaustion. "Please, help us." The words echoed in the silence of the abandoned city, and for the first time since they had landed, the human crew was fully aware of the gravity of the situation. They weren't just exploring a dead planet. They had found the last survivors of a civilization that had been ignored and abandoned by every other race in the galaxy. Aria felt a sense of responsibility stir within her. This wasn't just another mission. This was a chance to save a forgotten race. But as she looked at the creature, she couldn't help but wonder why no one had cared enough to help before. "Don't worry," Aria said softly, kneeling down. "We'll help you. We'll save your people." But as the team set to work, one question lingered in the air. Would they be able to save this alien race, or would they become just another chapter in the long list of forgotten worlds? As the humans continued their exploration, they moved the weakened alien to a safer location within the ruins. The alien, whose name was Silara, struggled to sit up but managed to speak in a voice that was soft yet full of history. Her people, she explained, had once been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, innovative, peaceful, and filled with wisdom. But now, they were the last of their kind, scattered and forgotten. The humans carefully set up a temporary base inside one of the few intact buildings. As the team worked, Captain Aria sat with Silara, asking her to share the story of her people. The alien's eyes, though tired and strained, carried a deep sadness as she spoke. "My people were known as the Valine," Silara began, her voice trembling with emotion. "We were builders, thinkers, and creators. For thousands of years, we thrived, trading knowledge and technology with other civilizations. But our success became our downfall. Greed and fear began to spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to see us as a threat, not because of our power, but because of our potential. Solara paused, her gaze distant, as though remembering painful moments from the past. We didn't fight back, she continued. We believed in peace, in cooperation. But the more we offered, the more they rejected us. Slowly, one by one, the great civilizations we had once called allies turned their backs on us. They distanced themselves, abandoned us. Eventually, they left us to die, without any help, without a single word. Arya listened closely, her heart heavy with the alien's words. It was clear that Solara's people had been betrayed. The Valine had given so much to the galaxy, only to be cast aside when they no longer served the interests of the other races. And now, here they were, the last of a once great civilization, struggling to survive on a forgotten planet. It was not always this way, Solara added, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sorrow. In our golden age, we built cities that touched the skies. We cured diseases, we advanced in ways others could not imagine. But when the others began to fear us, they took everything. Our technology, our resources, our people. And we were left with nothing. Captain Arya felt a deep sense of sorrow. It was clear that the Valine had been much more than a simple alien race. They were creators, innovators, and dreamers. And yet they had been discarded like old tools, ignored by those who once benefited from their knowledge. Why didn't anyone come to help you? Arya asked softly. Solara sighed. We were too different. The other races saw us as too advanced, too alien. They feared what we could become, and so they chose to let us wither away. There was a long silence between them as the weight of the words hung in the air. Arya stood up, her mind racing with a mixture of anger and determination. She could not understand how such a betrayal could happen, how a race that had given so much could be left to die alone. But one thing was clear. The Valine had been abandoned, and the humans were now their only hope. We won't leave you behind, Arya said firmly, her voice resolute. We'll help you rebuild. You won't be forgotten anymore. As Solara looked at her with cautious hope in her eyes, the humans knew that they had a long road ahead, but they were determined to help the Valine rise from the ashes, to give them the chance they deserved. The struggle was far from over, but the journey had only just begun. The night was quiet on the abandoned planet, the stars above barely visible through the thick clouds. The human crew sat around a small campfire, their faces illuminated by the soft orange glow. Captain Arya had gathered her team to discuss their next move. The weight of Solara's words lingered in the air, and the decision they faced was far from simple. We can't just walk away, Arya said, her voice firm. Solara's people are the last of their kind. We can't leave them to die here. Lieutenant Harris leaned forward, his expression conflicted. But we don't even know if we can save them. The planet is barely habitable, and the other races out there won't just sit by. What if helping them means putting ourselves in danger? Arya met his gaze without hesitation. We're already here. We can't just turn our backs on them. We've always done what's right. This is no different. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. There was no denying the risks. The planet was cold, desolate, and every sign pointed to the fact that the galaxy had forgotten about the Valine for a reason. But Arya's words were powerful. She believed that they had a responsibility, and she wasn't about to abandon these people now that they had found them. Solara, who had been resting nearby, overheard the conversation. Slowly, she stood up, her thin form swaying with exhaustion, and walked over to the humans. Her eyes were filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. Please, she said softly, her voice shaky. I know you don't owe us anything, but you're the first ones to care. The first ones to offer us help. We've been alone for so long. We don't know how to survive without you. Her words hit the humans like a punch to the gut. The loneliness in her voice was impossible to ignore. Arya's heart ached as she saw the alien's fragile form, the weariness in her eyes. The Valine had been abandoned for so long, and now they had no choice but to rely on strangers for survival. "We will help you," Arya said, standing tall. "We're not leaving you behind." The decision was made. There was no turning back now. They would protect the Valine, help them rebuild, and restore their hope. But even as the humans made their vow, doubts lingered. The galaxy had turned its back on this race for a reason. What if helping them brought danger to the human crew? What if they were too late to save them all? As Arya looked around at her team, she saw a mix of determination and concern in their eyes. They were all in this together, but the road ahead was uncertain. They would face challenges, unknown enemies, possibly hostile forces, and the struggles of trying to help a race that had been forgotten by the galaxy. But one thing was clear: the humans had made their decision. They would stand by the Valine, no matter the cost. Celerab bowed her head in thanks, her voice soft with relief. "You have no idea what this means to us." "We'll find a way," Arya replied, her voice resolute. "We'll help you. We won't let your people be forgotten." With the weight of that promise in their hearts, the humans prepared for the difficult journey ahead. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain: they would never turn their backs on those in need, no matter the risk. The next few days passed in a tense silence. The human crew worked tirelessly to establish a more secure base for the Valine survivors. They reinforced the buildings that were still standing, set up communications equipment, and began scouring the planet for resources that could be used to help the alien race rebuild. Meanwhile, Solara and the other Valine shared their knowledge and history, offering whatever they could to assist the humans in their mission. Captain Arya kept herself busy, her mind focused on the task ahead. But a constant nagging feeling tugged at her thoughts. They were on an isolated planet, far from any galactic hub, but what would happen when the rest of the galaxy found out? The Valine had been abandoned for so long, and if anyone learned that humans were helping them, it would only draw attention, dangerous attention. It wasn't long before that danger began to make itself known. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a message came through on the human ship's communication system. It was an encrypted signal, coming from an unknown source. Arya sat up straight in her chair as she read the message aloud to her team. "We know what you're doing, humans. You've chosen to help the Valine. We warn you, stay out of it. The galaxy has already passed judgment on their kind, and we will not allow them to rise again. You will be held responsible for interfering." The message was signed by a group known as the Joran Collective, a powerful and ruthless faction that had once waged war against the Valine. They had been the first to abandon the alien race, and since then, they had made it their mission to ensure that no one would help the Valine rebuild. They feared the potential threat of their return. The crew was silent as Arya processed the message. Her gut told her that this was just the beginning. The Joran Collective would not let this go. And if they were involved, it meant that other factions, other powerful groups, would soon take notice. "They found us," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tense. "We knew it would happen, but I didn't expect it to be this soon." Arya stood up, her mind racing. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but we can't back down now. The Valine are counting on us, and we're not leaving them to face this alone." "We'll need to be ready," Harris warned. "The Joran Collective won't just send a message next time. They'll send soldiers. They'll come to destroy us." Arya's eyes narrowed, her mind focused. She looked at Solara, who stood quietly by the doorway. The Valine leader had been listening closely to the conversation. Her face was filled with worry, but there was also something else: determination. "We will fight with you," Solara said, stepping forward. "You have already helped us more than anyone else. We won't run. We will defend our people." Arya nodded, grateful for the aliens' courage. "Together, we stand. We're not leaving, and we're not giving up. We'll face them head on." The humans and Valine knew that the peaceful days they had enjoyed were over. A storm was coming, and they would have to face it together. The Joran Collective, and whoever else stood against them, would soon know that the humans had no intention of backing down. As the crew began preparing for the battle ahead, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. They had chosen to protect the Valine, but now they had to make sure they were ready for the enemies that would come, drawn to the flames of hope that the humans had ignited. The days following the warning from the Joran Collective were filled with tension. Captain Arya and her crew knew that the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. The Joran Collective was known for its ruthlessness, and the threat of an attack was always hanging over them. The human team worked tirelessly to prepare for what was coming, reinforcing their base, testing their weapons, and strategizing for the worst-case scenario. But the attack came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, as the last light of the setting sun cast long shadows over the desolate planet, the first sign of the enemy appeared on the horizon. A massive ship, dark and menacing, descended from the sky, cutting through the thick clouds like a knife. It landed on the planet's surface with a loud thud, kicking up dust and debris. The humans knew instantly that the Joran Collective had arrived, and they were here to destroy. Arya wasted no time. She gathered her team and quickly ran through their battle plans. The crew had been trained for combat, but this would be their first true test. The Valine, too, stood ready. Though they were not soldiers, they had faced their share of danger over the years, and they were determined to fight alongside the humans. "We have to make sure they don't get to the survivors," Arya said, her voice steady despite the rising panic. "Our priority is to protect the Valine and their settlement. If we lose them, this whole mission is over." Lieutenant Harris nodded. "We've got the perimeter secured. If they come in force, we'll hold them off as long as we can." Silara stepped forward, her face a mask of calm. "We know this land better than anyone. Let us help you. We know where the best hiding places are, and we can move without being seen." Arya hesitated but then agreed. The Valine had been on this planet for centuries. Their knowledge of the terrain would be invaluable in the coming battle. As the Joran forces began to advance, the humans and the Valine took their positions. The atmosphere grew heavier by the minute. The once quiet and still planet now buzzed with tension as both sides prepared for the inevitable clash. The first shot rang out from the Joran ship, a blast of energy that struck a nearby building, sending chunks of debris flying. The humans returned fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness. Arya's heart raced as she observed the battle unfold. The Joran soldiers were formidable, well-trained, and heavily armed. They marched forward without hesitation, confident in their overwhelming strength. But the humans and the Valine weren't backing down. Despite the odds, they fought with everything they had. Arya could see the determination in Silara's eyes as she fired her weapon, her movements swift and precise. The Valine had learned to defend themselves over the years, and now they were fighting for their future. The battle raged on for hours. The Joran forces were relentless, but the humans and the Valine fought back with courage. Every blast of energy, every skirmish, felt like a struggle for survival, for something bigger than just this planet. This was a fight to prove that no one should be forgotten, that no one should be left behind. Despite the fierce resistance, it was clear that the Joran forces were gaining ground. Their superior numbers and firepower were overwhelming the small defense that the humans and Valine could muster. Arya knew they couldn't keep up this fight forever. They needed a way to turn the tide, to break the Joran's momentum. As the battle reached its peak, she realized what they had to do. "We have to go on the offensive," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "We need to hit them hard and fast before they can regroup." It was a risky move, but Arya knew it was their only chance. The humans and Valine had to work together and strike the Joran at their weak points, catching them off guard. Time was running out, and Arya wasn't about to let the Valine lose their last chance at survival. The war was far from over, but the first real test of their alliance had begun, and Arya was determined to ensure that it wouldn't be their last. The battle had raged through the night, with no clear victor in sight. The Zoran Collective's forces were relentless, pushing forward with their advanced weaponry and brutal tactics. The humans and the Valine, though brave, were slowly being worn down. Captain Area knew they couldn't sustain the defense much longer. The time had come for a change in strategy. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Area gathered her team. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of distant gunfire echoed in the valley. The Zoran forces were regrouping, preparing for another assault. The humans and the Valine had to act quickly before they were overwhelmed. "We can't just wait for them to come to us," Area said, her voice sharp with determination. "We need to hit them hard, but we have to do it together. We need to use everything we have, our weapons, our knowledge, and our trust in each other." Lieutenant Harris nodded, already pulling up a map of the area. "I've been studying their movements. If we strike at their supply lines, we can disrupt their plans, but we need to move fast and stay hidden." Silara stepped forward, her eyes filled with resolve. "We know the terrain better than anyone. We've survived here for centuries. The Zoran may have the numbers, but we have the advantage of knowing the land." Area looked at her. "You're right. Your knowledge of this planet is invaluable. We'll need your help to get to them before they can react." The plan was simple. Strike swiftly, disrupt the Zoran's resources, and make it clear that the humans and Valine would not be easily defeated. They would move quickly, silently, and decisively. The crew split into smaller teams, with the Valine leading the way. Area's team followed closely behind, each person focused and ready for whatever came next. They moved through the forests, using the cover of the dense trees and uneven terrain to stay hidden from the enemy. The Zoran Collective's forces were spread thin, and the humans hoped that a surprise attack would give them the edge they desperately needed. As they approached the Zoran supply depot, Area could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of the Valine. It was a fight to protect a race that had been abandoned, forgotten, and cast aside. The humans weren't just defending allies. They were standing up for what was right. "We strike in 5 minutes," Area ordered, her voice steady. "Everyone stay focused. Remember, we do this together." The team positioned themselves around the depot, preparing their weapons. They knew that once they made their move, there would be no turning back. The Zoran Collective would come for them, and they would come hard. At Area's signal, the humans and Valine launched their attack. The Zoran soldiers were caught off guard as the humans stormed in, their weapons blazing. The Valine, guided by their knowledge of the land, moved with surprising speed, flanking the Zoran from the shadows. The humans and the Valine fought side by side, a united front that the Zoran had not expected. The battle was fierce, but the humans and Valine fought with a shared purpose. Every shot fired, every move made was a step closer to victory. And with each passing minute, the Zoran forces began to falter. Area felt a surge of hope. The unity between her crew and the Valine was paying off. Together, they were proving that they could stand against the greatest threats the galaxy had to offer. They were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to thrive, to rebuild, and to protect the future of a race that deserved a second chance. The Zoran Collective would learn that day that no one, no matter how powerful, could stand against the combined strength of the humans and the Valine. The battle was far from over, but Area knew that with unity they had a chance. And for the first time since they had arrived on this forsaken planet, Area believed they could win. The battle had left its marks on the planet. The air was thick with smoke, and the landscape around the Valine settlement had been scared by explosions and gunfire. The humans and their alien allies had fought hard, pushing back the Zoran Collective's forces, but Captain Area knew this was just the beginning. The Zoran were relentless, and soon they would regroup and return with even more firepower. As the dust settled and the last of the Zoran forces retreated, Area gathered her team. The humans had won a hard-fought victory, but their position was still vulnerable. They needed to prepare for the next wave, and this time, It wouldn't just be the Joran they had to face. "Captain, we have a message," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tense. "It's from the Galactic Council." Aria's stomach tightened. The Galactic Council had always been distant, uninterested in the struggles of races like the Valine. The Joran's warning had already hinted at their involvement, but now it seemed the galaxy's governing body was also taking notice of what the humans were doing. "Put it through," Aria ordered, her voice steady. A few moments later, the screen flickered to life, and a stern figure appeared. The image of a high-ranking officer from the Galactic Council filled the display. His uniform was decorated with insignia that marked him as someone of power, and his expression was one of cold authority. "Captain Aria," the officer began, his voice heavy with authority, "we have been informed of your actions on the Valine homeworld. You have chosen to interfere in a matter that the galaxy has long since decided. The Valine are a lost cause, abandoned for their own failings. We are giving you a final warning." Aria stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "We're not abandoning them. The Valine have every right to survive. They have a future, and we're going to help them build it." The officer's expression didn't change. "You may have good intentions, Captain, but your actions are destabilizing the region. The Joran Collective, as well as other factions, have made it clear they will not allow the Valine to rise again. If you continue to aid them, the Galactic Council will hold you responsible. The consequences of your interference will be severe." Aria felt a surge of anger, but she kept her emotions in check. She had expected this, expected the Council to view their actions as a threat. But she wasn't about to back down now. Not after everything they had been through. "You can't decide the fate of an entire race based on fear and politics," Aria replied, her voice strong. "We're not turning our backs on the Valine. We're helping them rebuild. And if that means standing against the Council, then so be it." The officer's face darkened, his patience wearing thin. "You have been warned. This is your final choice, Captain. Cease your efforts and leave the Valine to their fate, or face the full power of the Galactic Council. You have 1 week to comply." With that, the transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. The humans stood motionless, processing what had just happened. Aria could feel the weight of the Council's threat hanging over them, but she also knew that they had already made their choice. There was no turning back now. "We can't let them push us around," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice low. "If we give in, the Valine will never get another chance. We can't let them down." Aria looked at her crew and then at Solara, who stood beside her, unwavering in her resolve. The Valine had suffered long enough. Now they had a chance for a new future, and Aria wasn't about to let the galaxy take that away. "We won't back down," Aria said firmly. "We've already made our decision. We will protect the Valine, no matter what the Council threatens. This is our fight now." The humans and the Valine were united in their determination. They knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but they also knew that they had to stand up for what was right. The Council's ultimatum was just another obstacle in their path, and they would face it together. As Aria looked out over the planet, she felt a surge of hope. The fight for the Valine's future had just begun, and they were ready to face whatever came next. The threat from the Galactic Council hung over them like a dark cloud. Aria knew the time for quiet defense was over. The Joran Collective had already regrouped, and the Council was pressuring them to give up on the Valine. Every passing hour brought the danger closer. The humans and Valine had to prepare for the final battle, a battle that could change everything. The day after receiving the Council's ultimatum, Captain Aria called for a meeting. Her crew gathered in the makeshift command center. The walls were covered with maps and tactical plans, but there was a sense of urgency in the air that couldn't be ignored. "We've got 1 week," Aria began, her voice steady but filled with determination. 1 week before the Council sends reinforcements, and the Joran will return in force. We can't afford to waste time. Lieutenant Harris nodded. "We've done what we can with the resources we have, But the Joran have superior numbers. We'll need to outsmart them. We don't just need to outsmart them, Arya said, turning to face the team. We need to show them that we won't back down. This fight isn't just about surviving. It's about standing for something bigger. The Valine deserve a future, and we're going to give it to them. The crew exchanged determined glances. They had seen the devastation the Valine had suffered, and now they were all in this together. No matter the risks, no matter the odds, they were committed to fighting for what was right. Silura stood up, her alien features betraying no fear. We've hidden long enough. We know this planet better than anyone, but we have to move quickly. The Zoran will expect us to hide again, but if we hit them first, we might catch them off guard. Arya turned to Silura, impressed by her confidence. Exactly. We'll use their overconfidence against them. We'll strike their supply lines again, but this time, we'll push harder. We'll create chaos. The plan was simple but dangerous. The humans and Valine would divide their forces and hit the Joran where they least expected it. They would strike fast, hit their supply caches, and disrupt their communications. The Zoran would be forced to divide their forces, making it easier for the humans and Valine to fight back when the reinforcements arrived. The humans and Valine worked together day and night, preparing for the offensive. The Valine shared their knowledge of the land, leading the humans to hidden caves and secret paths where they could set up ambushes. Arya's crew helped strengthen defenses, and they modified their weapons to be more effective in the difficult terrain. As the final days passed, the tension only grew. The humans and Valine had come to rely on each other, and their bond had strengthened in ways Arya hadn't anticipated. They had become more than just allies. They had become a family, united by a shared purpose. Finally, the day of the attack arrived. The air was thick with anticipation as the two groups prepared to launch their assault. Arya stood at the front of her team, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked over at Silura, who was standing beside her, ready to lead her people into battle. "This is it," Arya said quietly. "We fight for the Valine's future. We fight for our future." Silura nodded, a fierce light in her eyes. "We fight together. For survival. For freedom." The humans and the Valine moved out, their steps synchronized, their hearts set on victory. They had no choice now but to win. The battle for the Valine's future had begun, and they would give everything they had to ensure that it wasn't taken away. The battlefield was a sea of chaos. Explosions echoed through the valley, shaking the ground beneath the feet of the humans and Valine. The Zoran forces had arrived in full force, their ships descending from the sky, their soldiers advancing with ruthless determination. Captain Arya stood at the front of her team, her gaze sharp as she watched the enemy approach. This was it, the final fight for the Valine's future. The humans and Valine had struck hard and fast, hitting the Joran supply lines, disrupting their communications, and causing chaos within their ranks. But now, the Joran were regrouping, and their numbers were overwhelming. It was time for the humans and Valine to hold their ground and fight back with everything they had. "We hold the line here," Arya said, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped her. "Do not let them pass. We fight for our future." Lieutenant Harris was already in position, his rifle aimed at the oncoming Joran soldiers. "We've got your back, Captain," he said, his voice filled with determination. Arya nodded, grateful for the unwavering loyalty of her crew. The Valine, too, were ready. Silura stood at the front, her expression fierce as she led her people into battle. They were no longer the helpless survivors they had once been. They were warriors, fighting for the chance to rebuild their civilization. The first wave of Joran soldiers came crashing toward them, weapons raised, their footsteps heavy on the rocky ground. The humans opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkening sky. The Valine fought alongside them, their movements swift and precise, using the terrain to their advantage. The Joran had superior numbers, but the humans and Valine were united, and that made all the difference. Arya could see the chaos unfolding before her, the Joran soldiers falling back as the humans and Valine pressed forward with renewed strength. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves, for survival, for freedom, for the future of the Valine. But the Joran were not easily defeated. Their forces regrouped quickly, and a new wave of soldiers advanced, more heavily armed than before. Arya's heart pounded in her chest as she saw the enemy charging toward them, weapons aimed and ready to strike. The humans and Valine were holding their ground, but it was clear that the battle was far from over. "This isn't enough," Arya said, her voice urgent. "We need to push them back. Now." Silara's voice rang out across the battlefield. "Follow me," she commanded, rallying her people. She led the Valine into a daring charge, cutting through the Joran ranks with fierce determination. The humans followed suit, their weapons blazing as they fought with everything they had. The Joran soldiers faltered, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught. The humans and Valine pressed their advantage, pushing the enemy back with every step. It was a battle of wills, and the humans and Valine refused to give in. They fought as one, a united force determined to win at all costs. Arya watched as the Joran forces began to retreat. It wasn't an easy victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The humans and Valine had proven that together they were stronger than any enemy that stood in their way. As the dust settled and the last of the Joran forces fled, Arya took a deep breath, her heart still racing. The battle was over, but the war for the Valine's future had only just begun. "We did it," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice filled with relief. Arya looked at Silara, who stood beside her, her face marked with exhaustion but filled with pride. "We did it together." The humans and Valine had fought side by side, and together they had won. But Arya knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But for now, they had secured a future for the Valine, a future that would no longer be forgotten. And that, in itself, was a victory worth celebrating. The sun rose slowly over the planet, casting soft golden light on the battlefield. The sounds of war had faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. The Joran forces had been pushed back, their retreat leaving the humans, and Valine victorious. But as Captain Arya stood on the edge of the settlement, looking out at the scorched earth and broken landscape, she knew that the real battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The humans and Valine had won today, but the galaxy still saw them as a threat. The Galactic Council had made it clear that they would not tolerate interference, and while the Joran Collective had retreated for now, there was no telling when they would return, or if other enemies would rise in their place. Arya turned to look at the survivors around her. The Valine, though weary, stood tall. Their people had been through so much, but today they had fought back with the courage and determination that had been buried beneath years of fear and neglect. They had proven to the galaxy that they would not be forgotten. Silara approached her, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved us, Captain. Without you, we would have perished with our past." Arya smiled softly. "You fought just as hard as we did. Silara, we did this together." The bond between the humans and the Valine had grown stronger in the heat of battle. What had started as an alliance out of necessity had transformed into something far more meaningful. It was a partnership, a shared purpose that could not be broken by the threat of the Zoran or the Council. "I won't let them take away our future," Silara said, her voice steady. "We will rebuild with your help." Arya nodded. "We're with you. Whatever happens, we're not going anywhere." The Valine had lost so much over the years. Friends, family, their once great civilization, but they had not lost their hope. And now, with the help of the humans, they had the chance to rebuild from the ashes. The scars of the past would take time to heal, but the future was theirs to shape. As the days passed, the survivors worked together to restore the settlement. The humans taught the Valine new technologies, and in return, the Valine shared their ancient knowledge. helping the humans understand the complexities of their world. Slowly but surely, the ruins began to take shape once more, a new home for the Valine, and a new chapter for both species. But even as they rebuilt, Aria could feel the weight of the galaxy's gaze upon them. The Galactic Council would not forget what had happened here. The Zoran would not stay silent forever. And the humans, for their part, knew they had made powerful enemies by choosing to stand with the Valine. Yet, Aria didn't fear the future. The fight was far from over, but she knew that together, the humans and Valine were stronger than any threat the galaxy could throw at them. They had already proven that. "We'll face whatever comes next," Aria said, her voice filled with confidence. "We've already won the most important battle. We've given the Valine their future back." And with that, the humans and the Valine stood side by side, ready to face the future together. The battle had been hard, but the dawn of a new era had arrived. No longer would the Valine be forgotten. No longer would they be left to die alone. The galaxy would have to reckon with the power of unity, hope, and the unwavering determination of those who refused to back down. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was a future filled with possibility. And that was worth fighting for.